typical case, not where the building maybe is out of code and has to have substantial capital investment or something. Why would someone need to raise rent above 5% in this country?
Need as opposed to want, right?
Well, yeah. There are, so we didn't build anything, as we all know, from 2008 until about a year and a half ago. And
Market rate.
Yeah, for market rate, correct. And in
Rates
that,
in the air were all affordable housing.
yeah, yes. And during that time, people didn't do anything with their units either. So you have years of deferred maintenance. So you have folks getting in a place where, and not only deferred maintenance, but offering concessions. That's the other piece to this pie, is that and the market will turn again. You said if, but it will. So offering concessions. So they didn't invest in those properties during that time period. As we've seen people want to come back into Portland, as we've seen folks outside of the area want to invest, they're willing to go into those properties, buy them, make them into very nice properties, and that puts a lot of pressure on them.
To Justin, one of the things that I want to make sure we don't do in this process of reform is create an incentive for someone to use a for-cause eviction process. And so I want to be careful as we're going through all these reforms. And I think it's worthwhile having you observe, why is a for-cause eviction for most renters a bad thing? And how does it prevent them from renting in the future?
So a for-cause notice is if the tenant has violated the lease in some way. And
I'm assuming someone is doing it on a legitimate basis or as a pretext. But I'm most interested in what's the consequence to the renter in the future of having a no cause on his or her record?
So if a for-cause notice is given to a renter, the renter has the chance to know what the renter has done wrong and the chance to remedy that situation. They're given what's called a 30-14 notice, meaning that unless you fix the problem within 14 days, you're being asked to move in 30 days. And we think that that is fair, because the tenant knows what the tenant has done wrong, and the tenant has the opportunity to fix it. What we see with no cause notices is the tenant isn't given that opportunity. And so the landlord decides on his or her own what the violation was. Sometimes does not tell the tenant what, often does not, they're not legally required to tell the tenant what the violation was, and the tenant has no possibility to remedy it. And so the only option for the tenant is to move out, and if they move out before that termination period is over, it does not show up on the record for future rentals. But the next landlord still can call the previous landlord and ask about that rental situation. And oftentimes renters, because there's a lack of tenant education, Community Alliance of Tenants is really one of the only organizations that has like a renters' rights hotline to walk tenants through this. There are a number of other social service agencies, but for regular tenants, Community Alliance of Tenants is one. They believe that that termination notice is already on their record, and they are fearful to list that landlord as a reference on the next application because they don't have any say in terms of the conversation between the future potential landlord and the previous landlord.
Last question. We're talking about a renter state of emergency in the context of historically high numbers of renters who are what we call rent burden. What does that mean?
Rent burden means you're paying more than 30% of your income on rent. And extremely rent burden is when you're paying more than 50% of your income on rent. And as Steve mentioned earlier, many of our seniors on fixed income and Social Security and disabilities sometimes may pay more than 70% of their income.
And who sets the formula for what constitutes rent burden? Is that at the state level or the federal level?
It's the federal level, I believe.
And the assumption behind it is that above a certain threshold of what you're spending on your home, you're cutting into the money you'd otherwise have available for things like food and clothing and basic transportation. Yes. And we estimate that about half of our renters in our city are between rent burden and very rent burden.
Correct.
Other questions for this panel?
I would like to echo Deborah's statements from earlier. During that time, landlords were not investing in their apartments and were not making repairs, even with being asked to do so by tenants. And that is the nature of the dynamic between the tenant and the landlord, given the economic conditions.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So if you don't have to give some other invited testimony before we take amendments, or?
We have the city attorney here to answer any questions or provide, and Shannon Callan from our office, but
Okay, so we have them.
we can do that as needed.
Come on up, and then let's take up amendments with you there to give us some adult supervision while we do amendments. Who's got an amendment to propose? I think we have one set already in front of us. Right? I'm for the document, I'm sorry. Yeah, so Amanda, go ahead, here it is. So, so we have an amendment in front of us labeled Agenda Item 1030, and it makes some amendments to Directive D and then adds a Directive F. So do you have copies of that one? So I'll explain that amendment and move it, and then Commissioner Fritz, who's also interested in the same amendment, can talk about it as well. What it does is change shall to may there. In other words, here's the effect. It says, right now it says, the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management Director shall submit a request to the governor through Multnomah County to declare a housing emergency. It will now read may, and that is, we're not sure that we need to request the state's intervention yet. So we don't want to pre-program Carmen Merlo to make that request until such time as the council says, now we need to actually ask the state to declare an emergency as well. So changing shall to may obviously still preserves the council's ability at any time to direct the emergency management director to forward that request to the governor through the county, because that's the way it works. If the state's going to declare an emergency, the county has to ask the state. That's just what it says in state law. So this says we've got that tool, but we're not automatically using it. And then the second amendment in this same package is just a process by which, if we do proceed to declare an emergency, that the whole council, which is being asked to declare the emergency, is regularly updated on how we're implementing it. So it says the mayor's office shall submit written reports to council offices bi-weekly, providing status updates on efforts to implement the council's directions on the, I should say, housing and homeless emergency, and identifying any further council directives that may be needed. Okay, just housing, obviously homeless is included.
Mayor Hales?
So I would move that set of amendments, but
Question.
it's
Either a question for either you or for the attorney or for Shannon or for Rob. Sure. They're now turning to another attorney. We have a lot of people who are resources. I just want to ask a question about the first part of this amendment, about the changing the shall to a may on seeking the state to declare an emergency. Here's the question. My understanding is that thanks to the work of NAMI and other advocacy groups, there's about $20 million that the governor could release for mental health housing and services. That would be carved up statewide based on a formula. And I also understand that there are, from the community coordinated care organizations, the so-called CCOs, that there might be as much as 38 million of redundant reserves that could be tapped, where they might be, through the healthcare system, where there seems to be an appetite for using that money to provide housing for people that come out of programs like the Unity Center and the like. Does this amendment change in any way our opportunity to seek either of those funding sources?
As I understand it, Commissioner, no. The amendment takes away a formality that triggers a whole bunch of things at the state level that we don't necessarily think we need. None of that precludes you, the mayor, the rest of council and partners going to work with the governor, who is aware of all of the things that we're doing here today, to have those conversations with her, with the CCOs and others.
And Commissioner Novick, I know you've been working on this issue a little bit with Ed Blackburn and others. the sponsor of your Sunday Parkways was, who I had the honor of riding with the other day, alerted me to the 38 million and the desire to get some of that money into the system. I don't know whether that can be done administratively by the governor or an agency head or legislatively, but it seems like we have the momentum of the CCOs thinking that's a good idea to tap that money. And Josh, do we have a plan to follow up on that?
Yeah, there are quite a few conversations happening right now, both within our building, with our partners in the county, and with the CCOs themselves. It's a bigger conversation than just what we're trying to do here. There are a lot of ways that I believe that money can be moved out of the CCOs and into the hands of people to actually put money onto the street or things like this.
Let me just say, I think it's encouraging that our healthcare friends are beginning to realize that investing in stable, permanent housing is long-term going to save money and result in fewer people getting their primary healthcare services in the emergency room, and maybe better outcomes on long-term. So.
Yeah, so let me restate where I think we are and where I think the council would be poised on this issue. That is, we want the ability to request declaration from the state. We intend to ask the state for serious funding from that pot and others if it gets us $1 more to have a state declaration of emergency than we get with a local one. I will bring forward a recommendation that we seek a state declaration, but we don't know yet that that's a necessary condition for us to get the state funding. I've talked to the governor about that particular need for mental health supportive housing coming out of the Unity Center. She's very supportive, but I don't, if it improves our case versus any other folks around the state that might be competing against us for that money, for Multnomah County to declare a declaration and to seek the state declaration, then obviously we will want to do that.
So Mayor, I'm prepared to second this amendment and put it on the table.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Actually,
Commissioner Fritz wanted to discuss. Go ahead.
I have a suggestion for, we're talking about the amendments at 10:30, right?
Yes.
I have a friendly amendment, additional amendment, another one-word change. This is actually from Carmen Merlot. She pointed out that the second sentence now says, request shall identify the city as seeking assistance regarding state assistance, provision of services for the homeless and health and mental health services, and direct state agencies to utilize and employ state personnel, equipment, and facilities for activities designated to alleviate the circumstances giving rise to the emergency for the protection of the health and safety of citizens affected by the emergency. Carmen's suggestion is we might say residents instead of citizens,
okay,
because we want to help residents who don't have to be citizens.
I understand that's a friendly amendment. I think that we're.
Yeah, well, the definition would be people who are in the city or citizens, whether or not they are citizens of the United States. But it's something that's the Secretary of Nurse.
That's the scrivener's change. So, Commissioner Fritz, did you have some other comments?
Yeah, I would like Josh to further explain the second amendment, which I'll just go through again. The Mayor's office shall send in written reports to the council offices bi-weekly, providing status updates on efforts to implement the council's directions on the housing emergency and identify any further council directives that might be needed.
Yeah, thank you for that, Commissioner. One of the things that you'll be voting on today is to actually not only include housing in code as a reason for an emergency, but also changing from simply having the mayor declare to having council declare. I know the mayor felt strongly that this should be a shared decision, particularly in a case like housing.